everybody! I am about to try something brand new with the horse dong, as we've called him, but actually he's more a tribute to the Firehorse, which is the Chinese astrological year that we're about to head into. So wish me luck! So what I've been doing is preparing masking fluid, which is what I'm going to be painting. What I usually do is I paint this on the inside of the areas I want covered. In this case, I'm going to be trying something a little new because I want to ink the entire figure. So I'm going to be painting the masking fluid on the outside, around the edges of the figure, and then inking him completely with a red ink. And we are going to see whether I manage to fuck it up or not. So I'm going to adjust my camera slightly. There we go. And yeah, this is just something that I saw the other day that inspired me to try it. To use masking fluid, you have to make sure the surface is as smooth as possible, which is why I'm doing this. Masking fluid can be tricky to work with because it's dries extremely quickly. It dries like latex, so it can get lumpy and bumpy. So we're going to see. We're going to give it our best shot. So if you're interested, stick along for the ride. I always start by doing the edges with a very small little squeezy bottle that has a precision nozzle on it, and I use my very favorite tool. Whoopsie, the head appears to have fallen off, which is this, which helps spread the masking fluid out. So with masking fluid, you want to get as even a spread as possible. That isn't easy, but it is doable. So I'm not taking the fluid all the way to the edge of the page. I'm just freehanding this area because it's more simple. I tend to use the nozzle for the tricky areas where there's fine detail. All that the masking fluid does is protects the paper in the areas I don't want the ink to touch. So I'm going to be inking the figure quite carefully and not making splashes and splooshes everywhere. So I'm just kind of more or less putting a layer about 5 centimeters around him. A lot of people will tell you that masking fluid does not need to go on this thickly, which it doesn't always, depending on what you're using it for. I tend to err on the side of caution because the ink can sometimes seep through if there are tiny bubbles or little imperfections. I wouldn't put it on this thickly where I'm using a lighter paper, but this is a 640 gram cotton paper and it can take a lot of punishment. So we are hoping that there's no sort of damage or tearing to the paper when it comes off. But were you using it, for example, to create effects with watercolors or on a less sort of sturdy paper, you would probably do it a lot less thickly. You would apply it a lot less thickly than this. Some people actually water it down by mixing it with water. This particular brand, Winsor & Newton, is quite pricey. You can get much cheaper brands. I like this particular one because of the way that it comes off. It kind of comes off in one piece, which is a lot like peeling sunburn. It's fabulously satisfying. And it's also slightly colored, so you can see where you've painted, which a lot of them aren't, and I'm not quite sure why, because it makes a lot of sense to be able to see where you've painted.
One hour later.
So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to mix some colors up. What I've decided to do, I got interrupted by a very important phone call halfway through showing you how to mask. This is what the fully masked creature looks like. So you can see there's just sort of layer of yellow around everything, and that is going to protect that paper from getting colored. So what I'm going to be doing with him now is putting down a layer of a sort of golden yellow color, a very light layer of that, followed by the red that I want him to be, because he's a Firehorse, and I want there to be sort of, we want to go on the warm side of red and not the cool side. So he's going out the way for a minute, and we're going to just be mixing and testing some inks. It's a little bit more yellow than I wanted, so I'm going to try and darken it a little bit. That is the shade I'm after, and I'm going to make this a very gentle underneath layer. So we're going to let that dry for a bit. And now for the red. This is the red that I have pre-mixed, and what I'm after with this one is to get a very translucent ink. This particular mixture contains some ink that has shellac in it, which makes them for a more opaque finish. So I'm going to water it down a little bit, but I suspect it's going to be too opaque, and I'll probably have to start from scratch and just make something translucent. Yeah. When I paint over the dark areas, you can see it's a little bit opaque, and that is what we don't want. So what I will do is use it as a base and create something a little bit more opaque, translucent. So for the darker areas, I'll be using a little bit of this, which is a color I love called Writer's Blood. Any writers out there? That's your blood. Bear in mind, this is a whole new technique that I'm trying, so if it doesn't go swimmingly the first time around, I'm not going to be surprised. This brand is a much more translucent ink itself. I actually quite like that to begin with. But what it will do is sink in and not sit on top as much as an ink that has shellac in it. is a little dark. I'm thinking of using that for the darker areas. I need to. I'm going to add some reddy red in here. And a little bit of this. This is also quite a reddy red. Let's see what we have. I've watered it down quite a bit, which also improves the opacity. That would be the lighter shade of red, which I think needs darkening a little bit. So there we have more of an oxblood. We've kept the translucent nature of it. Definitely on the warmer side of red. And this is going to be the darker red for the darker areas. She's a little on the purple side, so I'm going to just add a little more red to it. I'm not taking this, you know, I'm not going to get too fussy about it, because this is really an experiment and it is a study for another picture. So I would usually spend a good hour and a half mixing my colors and getting them 100% perfect. But like I say, because this is a study, it's something that I'm not going to spend an inordinate amount of time doing. But I think I'm happy with the reds that I've got there, and that the trick now is really going to be blending them. And there's going to be a lot of fiddling around with water and sponges and all sorts of things you may never have seen before, because I've just made this up as I go along. So what I'm going to start by doing is applying a layer of water to the entire thing. It stops the ink from sinking in too quickly, and basically forming hard edges, as well as allowing a lot of room for sort of removing anything I might need afterwards. So if I want to remove ink, having a wet surface to work on seems to work a lot better. I have to also be careful with the brushing because the fine liner I use is sort of slightly water soluble and can get moved around. The color of the black can get moved around a little bit. So we do this carefully and step by step. And we're experimenting, remember, so who knows what will happen. So, like I say, I'm going to start off by applying a yellow layer underneath. And I'm going to use an oval brush to do that. I'm going to mainly focus on putting it in the light areas because that's where I want it to show up the most. It's really more of an undercoat than anything. Yeah, as I said, you'll see how the liquid beads in the areas where the latex has been applied, which is exactly what we want. Now what I'm going to do is dry this a little using a roller to get the water droplets. And it does tend to bubble and frizz a little bit. But I want to get all the water droplets out of the way so we get sort of an even finish. And remove any sort of excess water before we put on the next layer. Being careful not to stray into the areas where there's no latex. And then what I'm going to do is even out the yellow. And now, before the yellow dries, we're going to start applying the red. And that is going to be a fun and interesting exercise. Lighter red that I made. And it is a little darker than I had anticipated. So I might water it down. And the trick is just to get everything in an even and smooth distribution first. Yeah, my lighting in this room isn't ideal, unfortunately, so the effect I really wanted was it almost to look like a screen print, and I think we're getting there. And what I'm going to now do is use a quite a rough dispersion brush to go with the lighter areas. Using this, almost like a toothbrush. I believe they're for putting on makeup. but I don't wear much of that, so I don't really know. I just find them very useful. And we're going to lighten some of the areas a little bit more, just to give it a bit of depth.
$2,000
And because I've had a last minute impulse, because he's a Firehorse, I have decided to add a layer of Tropic Gold over this red, which I believe, to my eyes, is looking a little pink. This is a very translucent ink, and if anything, it will enhance the shadow areas. So he may be more of an orange horse than he is a red horse. But like I say, aside from being a study, he's also a fire horse. So a little fire is not unwarranted.